Intelligence Assessment of Argentine Babies. Argentine Scale of Sensory Motor Intelligence. The purpose of this work is to present a test which allows the assessment of the behavior of our infants from a consecutive development approach. There are two main periods in the development of intelligence, before and after the constitution of the symbolic or semiotic function, which appears within the age of 16 and 20 months old. The first period is called sensory motor intelligence. The sensory motor intelligence is the ability to solve problems through activities in which perception, attitudes, tone, and movements without symbolic evocations, that is, before the verbal language appears, are mainly part of. The Argentine Scale of Sensory Motor Intelligence, EAIS, was created for babies aged from 6 to 24 months old. This scale was built considering 323 Argentine babies in order to know the level of mental development during the non-verbal period, obtain standard figures of reference of the Argentine population, and contribute with a useful as well as effective tool to diagnose the intellectual development of Argentine babies aged from 6 to 24 months old and detect cognitive disorders. Baby tests have been used for a long time. They have been considered a landmark in the measurement of the infant's development. They assess the psychomotor development in 4 areas: the motor function, the coordination, language, and the social aspect. Although these scales for the assessment of the psychomotor development have filled a major emptiness in the diagnosing, treatment, and prevention of the infant's mental health, they fail to consider the cognitive development of even younger children properly. It is in the 60s that an interest to create tools to verify Piaget's observation described in his studies on the early intellectual development appeared. During the last 40 years, it has been necessary to analyze the intellectual mechanisms of the sensory motor period and obtain a more precise construction of the test described by Piaget in order to verify his hypothesis. Casati and Lezine, 1968, designed a scale, the first attempt in France, with a series of standardized tests based on Piaget's experimental and controllable observations over that period. The test was standardized with a population of 305 people aged from 6 months to 2 years old, 170 girls, and 135 boys. In Chile, Latin America, Hausler, 1981, created the first tool for the assessment of intellectual development for children under 2 years old. The theoretical basis is Piaget's idea on the development of the child's intelligence. Unfortunately, no attempts were made to standardize the test, so the Chilean children ages were distributed in different stages. In Argentina, the necessity to count on a standardized tool to diagnose the baby's intellectual development made us revise the above-mentioned test and adapt and modify the stages of sensory motor intelligence test by Casati and Lezine. Both the results we obtained and the test we called Argentine Scale of Sensory Motor Intelligence are presented in this work. Casati and Lezine's test was revised and both the assessed cognitive aspect and the order by stages were kept, but changes were introduced in the administration of the scale as a result of its use in other countries in a different historical period. Later, the French scale was translated into Spanish, and after using this tool with an Argentine population of babies, the following changes were introduced in the scale. A more didactic protocol of the test was created in order to let examiners test the child at the same moment of its administration through a more simple proceeding. Changes were introduced regarding the game material to give babies more confidence and higher chances of attraction. To avoid the toxicity of the material and to work from an ecological point of view, the cars, the doors, the rake and the rings were made of wood. whereas in the original test they were made of soft plastic. The place of the administrator of the test was modified. For Casati, the administrator had to be on the child's right, whereas in this adaptation the administrator has to be opposite him. Like this, there are more chances that the child will communicate in a better way and will show a higher interest in the test. The scale was always administered in the presence of the child's parents and teachers. Casati and Lecine's test was administered in a nursery kindergarten without parents or teachers. A different criterion was used to ascertain the stage in which the child was. The maximum stage reached in the different administered item was not used, but the medium of the different stages. We set a score called summary stage. Characteristics of the population. The sample was taken from 323 babies aged from 6 to 24 months old from the Hospital Materno Infantil Ana Goitia, a nursery infants hospital, children from the Hospital Italiano of Buenos Aires, and 2 kindergartens from the government of the city of Buenos Aires. The population from the Hospital Ana Goitia and the kindergartens basically belong to medium and low class, whereas the children from the Hospital Italiano belong to medium and high class. The criteria for inclusion were a gestational age as from 37 weeks without delivery or after delivery disorders, and a development quotient higher or equal to 0.85 in the Psychomotor Development Assessment Scale, Rodriguez, Arancibia, and Undurraga, 1979. The scale was administered in 1999, 2000, and 2001 to healthy babies aged from 6 months and 1 day old to 24 months old inclusive. The child was with a close relative, mother, father, teacher, and said administration varied according to the age of the baby. Less time with babies aged up to 14 months, the test taking 10 minutes approximately, and more time with older babies, the test taking up to 20 minutes. Results. The results obtained in each test of the scale shows the stage of the child is going through. The stage has a beginning, a transition, and an end. These stages make up an ordinal scale reflecting the progression of intelligence in the sensory motor period. Series A, Exploration of the Objects. This test consists of 7 items and gives the child the opportunity to handle the toys directly. The test makes it possible to express levels of more complex behaviors, applied to the exploration of only one object. The purpose is to observe how the child advances as it handles the object, but in a progressive reaction, so as to discover the use of the object. Series B, Searching for the Disappeared Object. This test evaluates the construction of the notion of object from a transitory perspective to the acquisition of the notion of permanent object, including the succession of invisible movements. In this test, stages are watched at the beginning and at the end only. It has 7 items, and during them, the researcher hides an object partially behind a cardboard sheet, then fully, and then hides an object under 1, 2, and 3 pieces of cloth successively. Series C, Using Proxies. The proxies test suggests 3 types of situations through which the child reaches the desired object, using the ribbon, the supports, or the rake. In the first 2 situations, ribbon and supports, the baby must relate these 2 proxies with the object he wants to reach. More complex is what follows. On the contrary, with the rake, the baby must create the relationship, turning the rake into a tool to succeed in reaching the desired object. C1, Proxy, Ribbon. In this test, the baby is offered a ring with a toy in it, tied with a short ribbon. Then a ring tied to a longer ribbon is offered, and finally 2 long ribbons are offered. One is tied to the ring and the other is free. C2, Proxy Support. This proxies test includes 2 different elements, pieces of cloth and a wooden disc placed on a support. This test shows a behavior performed by babies every day. In effect, children aged 8 months old approximately try to attract any desired object which may be close to them by pulling the tablecloth or the wheel of father's cars, etc. As from the end of stage 5, the baby faces a more complex situation. He has to make rotation movements to obtain the toy. He is offered the wooden disc placed on the support. C3. Proxy tool. Different from the two previous tests, ribbon and support, in this one the baby is expected to be able to build the relationship trying to use the rake as a tool to reach the doors which are not near. On purpose, the rake is placed with its teeth upwards to check whether the baby is capable of placing it correctly as a tool for pulling. Up to item 5, the baby is offered the rake and the two doors, but in item 6, he is given a stick with a cube. Series D. Combination of objects. This test, just as the exploration of object tests, offers the child the opportunity to handle the toys directly. It includes two series, tube rake and tube chain. D1. Tube and rake. This 5-item series presents levels of behavior which become more complex and are applied to the combination of two objects. It aims at observing the way the child advances in combining the two objects progressively, tube and rake, in order to meet the goal. Take small paper balls from the tube. During this period, we observe the child's progressive reaction to find out how to use the rake to take the small paper balls out of the tube. This implies finding out that the rake has to be inverted, that is, using the handle as a tool. D2. Combination of objects, tube, chain. During this period, we observe the child's spontaneous behavior in the act of introducing a small chain made of clips inside the tube, considering the strategies used in order to solve the situation. He can transform the chain in a rigid element or make it small to meet the goal. Assessment criteria, summary stage. Essentially, sensory motor intelligence assesses from a qualitative point of view the child's cognitive processes. Both the goal finally met and the way he tries to solve the proposed situation are important. However, with this scale, we were able to codify each child according to the results obtained, in consideration of all the tests administered at an end or summary stage. The criterion was to determine in each series the highest stage reached, considering the child is at a certain stage when he succeeds in doing at least an item of that stage. Later, his responses are subtly analyzed, series by series, and then the stage he is at is determined. This methodology made us build a summary measure of all the tests, known as the summary stage. We can conclude that with the EAIS, we succeeded in knowing the stages and mechanisms inherent to the genetic process in the construction of intelligence in the Argentine population assessed. Second, we succeeded in illustrating each pre-verbal stage of the intellectual processes. We obtained standard values of Argentine children so as to determine a term of reference for our population. We went into the knowledge of intellectual processes deeper with respect to those motivations which influence on the cognitive process, such as affective relationships, psychism organizers, and the means stimulation. Finally, the research work on the assessment of babies is a contribution to the initial education and the neurodevelopment, and at the same time, it is a tool of a great importance in order to know the baby in depth and value his individual achievements from the intellectual point of view. Let me show you what I can do, and don't highlight my weaknesses. Just rescue my best qualities.